Have you ever had someone in your team that you were so close of letting that person go, but then suddenly in some another role or in some another context, that person thrived? Or have you ever been so enthusiastic about that perfect fit, that person that you just hired for the project, and then weeks after, that person became suddenly disengaged, underperforming, causing a lot of friction? In such situations, usually we as leaders are thinking, what's wrong with that person? But actually, much better question is what our organizational system is doing to that person. As leaders, we know that behavior is personal, but as a systemic leaders, we also know that very often behavior is systemic. British thinker William Tate said it best: if the fish in a fish tank are unwell, don't just treat the fish, check the water. We as leaders usually are focused on individuals. We have that tendency to go and check skills, personality, attitude. But we are missing the whole system around. We are missing the whole relational field. We are missing all dynamics that are going under the surface. Because what on the surface looks like performance issue or a difficult person situation is actually just a symptom of some deeper issues that are happening in the system. And deeper issues in the system can be loyalty to the previous leader, unclear boundaries, misplaced accountability, emotional residue of some past event, and all such things we are not seeing if we are just focusing on the individual and wanting to fix the individual and what's wrong with that person. Of course, it is not that the person do not have responsibility. Everyone is responsible for its behavior, for sure, but system is the one that is actually creating conditions. And then behavior of certain person is a sort of reaction to all that invisible conditions that are very active in the system. Last few years, I'm working with people on seeing this invisible part of the systems, seeing this, what is really happening below the surface, and focusing there in order for a system to thrive and not just barely to survive. I have a lot of stories about difficult people. And in one of my past roles in my career, I was head of a resource management office, and that office was actually involved in finding the right place for each person within a very big company. I enjoyed there because it was really nice for me to see how people are able to enjoy and to give their best in some teams, while in some other teams that same person was behaving a totally different way. So for me, it was a challenge to find the right place for everyone, but it was also a very nice fact that we had a lot of different teams where there were a lot of different subcultures, and it was actually possible almost for all the people to find some place where they are thriving, when it's good for them, for their growth, and it's also good for the company. And in such role, I was working a lot with people. I was also working a lot with leaders of the teams. I was working a lot on hiring new people and putting them where we were needing them. And this story of difficult people was something that I spent a lot of time and very rarely in that my career, and I was doing that really for years. It was impossible to find the system, the environment, the team for the person where that person can operate and work normally and that everyone is okay with that. It was really just a few people that we need to let go because it was not possible to find the right system between all those that we had at that moment in time. But usually it is that system has its own behavior, its own dynamics, and some people are fitting to that system better and some people are not very good fit for a certain system. Now I will share one story with you from that time when I was in that role. One of the leaders invited me to help him solve the issue with the new hired engineer. Of course, I was involved in the hiring of the new engineer and I was the one who was matching that engineer with that particular team, and I was sure that it was the perfect match. It was really the right man for the right job, right technology, the similar values, everything according to my knowledge at that time was perfect. So I was then talking with the leader a bit and also with the engineer and also with some other team members. And very quickly I found out what was the issue. And there were two things. First issue was that we hired engineer to do architectural designing work on the new features. And what he was doing all the time from his employment in our company to that moment when I was invited there to help them was just some bug fixes on the old code and no sign of the design work and something what he was actually hired for. So we changed that. That was one thing. He was assigned to that majority of his working time. He will do the work that he is hired for, and some minority of his time he can help them with the bug fixes. And the second thing which I noticed at that moment in time was that he reported to the, of course, team lead, but also to the senior architect that was somehow overlooking the whole bigger division. And those two had their own issues from before, and they were giving some sort of conflicting priorities to the engineer. So here I agreed that the leader of the team will work in more coordination with the senior architect, and that the list of priorities for the engineer really needs to be clear and confirmed by both. So those were just two things that we changed what he's working and changed his list of priorities. And after one sprint, they reported that things are improving, that things are getting better, and that he's really now helping team very well. And I think after a few months or maybe half of the year, that engineer even became the new team lead of the team. He really took a lot of new responsibilities. He was sharing all the new ideas. He was somehow lifting up the energy of the whole team. So it was really one good, successful story. Unfortunately, at that moment in time, I wasn't very fluent in systemic leadership. I actually didn't know that systemic leadership exists, but I was doing things based on my leadership experience, based on my intuitive sensing, what needs to be checked and done. And I really saw in that career, when doing such things with difficult people, that each time when something in the system changes, then the people responded to that. That is one very important learning. And today, when I know a lot about systemic leadership, even in that case, I would be able to do more. For example, that engineer was hired to replace another senior engineer that left the team. And while we know that people were accepting the new engineer consciously, what is invisible is that they were not accepting him unconsciously, because in themselves they were still having emotional residues of that event that the previous engineer, who was the heart of that team, left. This is just one example. But now when I know a lot about systemic leadership, and now when I'm thinking about some stories of difficult people and cases and the things that I did at that time, I see that I could do much more if I would be aware of the things that are invisible, of the dynamics that are under the surface. And that's the reason that I'm now sharing some of the things with you, because I really want that you are aware of all the possibilities, and that you are aware that there are numerous things going on in the system. And if you are able to look into them, then they are becoming visible, and then you can do something, and then you can make a difference between the thriving system and the one that is just barely surviving. One of the most damaging reflexes in the leadership is the problem is in the person. We see certain behavior, and of course we assume it comes from the individual. But behavior can be relational, contextual. One person can be the blocker in one team and the catalyst in another team. So systemic leaders never ask who is to blame, but systemic leaders are asking, what role is this person being asked consciously and unconsciously to play in this system? When you stop asking what's wrong with the people and start asking more what is really going on in the system, you are just opening the new possibilities. You are then shifting from this person-centric to system-aware thinking. You are shifting from problem-solving to pattern sensing, and you are then able to see that what others are seeing as a possible performance issue problem on the surface can be just maybe the placement issue or the contextual issue, or that the system asked someone to carry something they shouldn't. So the next time when someone in your team is underperforming, stop, pause, and ask yourself, what pressure is this person absorbing? What's unclear here? What dynamics are maybe repeating from the past? Sometimes the most powerful leadership move is not to fix someone or the situation, but to see the whole system and what is really happening below the surface. You know, when the fish in the fish tank are unwell, don't treat the fish. Check the water.